This is Auntie Up, Indigenous women talking about important shit. Welcome to Auntie Up, the podcast by, for, and about Indigenous women. Shanchlein anije, eshrachlan tagish, klinget kuchan, tan kwachan iche, aguna gajel iche. I'm Christine Genier. I am a woman of the Wolf Clan. I am Tan Kwachan. Lateral violence is not a unique experience. We've all been subject to it, and quite likely we have even perpetuated lateral violence. It takes place in the workplace. It takes place in our communities, in our families. And I'm really, very privileged myself. But that too, I'm from a very small northern community. And to speak to this conversation, I would have had to have spoken to anyone in that. And I've not done that. And to speak to this on a national level, I feel would be lateral violence without having given anyone the opportunity to speak back to it. But I will talk about a little bit maybe about some of what I've experienced on the larger level. When I quit my job at the CBC, one of the tweets that I got to read was, geez, all these Nietzsche's quitting the CBC for the Facebook likes. Maybe I should quit too. And yeah, that stung. And it does dig in a little bit and makes me think, should I still be speaking? How does this impact the conversations we need to have and the work we need to be doing? Well, today we're going to be talking about lateral violence. It's a tough topic, but the aunties are up for it. Stephanie Moses Feletto is my co-host. We are also joined by Kim Wheeler, and we have a special guest who is working in the field who we will introduce shortly. Kim, shokwitha ni'i. It's nice to see you again.
You too, Christine. I too quit my job at the CBC, and I wasn't quite vocal about it on social media until quite a bit of time had passed. And I think it might have been when you had put out your story that I thought, wow, she really needs some sisters to stand behind her and tell their truth. And so I did that as well. And, and I was told that there were whisperings that, don't believe me, don't believe the reasons why I quit. But, and that also stung. And, I try to be a good person. I try to uphold people. But my big question that I want to talk with Audrey about today is, how do we call out lateral violence without being laterally violent? I'm going to throw it over to you, Stephanie, to introduce yourself and to introduce our guest.
Wajak Misawe, Kapatuatat Nishnakas, Nesta Stephanie Feletto. My spirit name is the first sound of thunder coming. My name is Stephanie Moses Feletto. I'm from Moose Cree First Nation, and I reside here in the city of Toronto today. Thank you both for introducing our topic today. And for me, lateral violence, the topic that came to my mind is, our ways are so kind, our traditional ways, our ways of knowing, the ways we gather when we're in ceremony, when we're together as a community. I was looking over some videos this morning of my late grandfather and some photos. And, he was always smiling, and the kindness and the love. And I always remember the things that they shared. And, I try to remember those things. And, oftentimes we get, caught up in, the colonial way of things that were imposed on us. And we forget what that kindness is. We forget what community is. We forget how to care for one another and feed one another and teach one another. All those good things. I can't say, I can say that, yes, I've been a victim of it. And, in my upbringing and such, we learn what not to do and how we can, be better and show that kindness. So on that note, our guest today is doing some of the work needed to address this. She is also a dear friend, a person I know. Her name is Audrey Gilbeau. She is a member of Bingwi Niashe Anishinabek in Northwestern Ontario. She is the executive director of Nokiwan Tribal Council, and she supports First Nations in areas of government. Audrey offers a different approach to lateral violence, one that is culturally relevant and based on our teachings, one that looks at kindness and asks, where do these behaviors come from and how do we challenge them? Audrey, welcome to Auntie Up. We're so glad you could join us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very honored to be invited into this circle, and especially with this conversation. It's very near and dear to me and the work that we do at Nokiwan, but I think it's also really important to the work that we all should be doing, and the focus, especially the kindness piece, and measuring how we each are contributing to improving kindness or spreading kindness versus participating in lateral violence. I think those are some of the really serious conversations we need to be having right now.
We've heard that term, or I've heard that term more recently, lateral kindness as opposed to lateral violence. Why have you flipped that narrative?
Well, that's a really loaded question, but I think it's really important to do all of our identity as Indigenous people as well. I mean, what do we hear? This morning I heard Regional Chief Glenn Hare talk about the opiate addiction and how we as Indigenous people just get studied and studied and studied, rather than sitting down and coming up with real meaningful solutions and things that can actually make a difference. I think we become victim and even participants in that narrative of we're sick, we're unwell, we're drug addicted, so it's all of this negative words all the time. And when I think about that, and I think about those most marginalized people, people without homes, people without beds to sleep in at night, people who don't have a family to connect with. If that's the narrative and the story they're hearing, how can they possibly find hope in that? So flipping it, one of the really key things that we've done at Nokiwan, when we talk about lateral violence and violence in the workplace and violence in community, there's legislation that speaks very clearly to that. There's a criminal justice system that speaks very clearly to when you harm another person. But from our own Indigenous worldview, we have really excellent and beautiful teachings that really help to frame a better understanding of how, and the other thing I've learned through this process is it's about we, not about me. And, when legislation, when we look at that, it's all about me and how someone has harmed me. And that's important. I'm not saying that's not important. But from our Indigenous worldview, it's very much about we as a community. And, when we talk to community about our ways of knowing, being, doing, and understanding, they don't talk about an individual person, but they honor that individual contribution to the collective community. And, it goes to the crab in the bucket, so flip it back again to that lateral violence. It's not about honoring that one person climbing out. It's, how is that person doing that on the backs of others? So it's really trying to change that mindset. And a lot of the work that we're doing at Nokiwan with lateral kindness is looking at the sweetgrass teaching. So the sweetgrass blade can be both. One side is very rough, but the other side is very shiny. And so we focus on the shiny side, and we really emphasize that in different ways, So that's just really a start of it, the conversation.
Audrey, very good to meet you. It's good to see you here. Shroni for having this conversation with us, a difficult one at that. I've been thinking about this conversation as we were leading up to it, and especially our place here, the Aunties. We are all from a broadcast background, and this is what we do for a living. And for the first time in the history of telecommunications, we are getting platforms in ways that we haven't before. And in this instance, we're creating a platform. How much is that, in your opinion, in your view, contributing to this lateral violence that we might not even know that we're delivering ourselves, where we are concerned about losing our platform, our microphone, because, when we're in the public face, it feels like a very precious space that we're about to lose. Someone's going to take it from us. We focus on this fame, on this being able to get our voices out there. Does that impact the way we're relating to each other in this world where instead of stepping on someone so that people can see me, I'm lifting others up to come with me?
Yeah, I think that's so important. How do we start to illustrate celebration instead of focusing on trauma? And trauma is really an important piece of this conversation. Historical trauma, lived experience trauma. I mean, it's happening today. It's continues to follow us. But I think starting to celebrate accomplishments of awesome women like yourselves. I look at Stephanie, I see the work that she's doing, and in that space, like, this is hard work, but it's happening and it's being done, and it's being done in a very supportive way too, a loving way. And, with especially that area that Stephanie is working in, I think there's so much room for the support, but also embracing people that are going through that. But when I look to Kim, I look to you, Christine, I listen to Jolene, when she does her Anemki Waju stories, like, those are really important that we have our women representing those teachings, but also acknowledging those, how do I call it? I see people in our communities all the time, those natural helpers that do it quietly. They're the people that show up with the pot of soup when someone has passed away. It's because it's the way to show support to a family, but also to show love and care. So that's like at a very micro community level. But what you are all doing with bringing a voice to difficult conversations, but doing it in a way that's forward thinking and not just always looking back. I think that's also really important. So I commend all of you for doing this. And it requires a great deal of bravery and courage to have difficult conversations, but to do it on a national platform is commendable.
Well, that was very laterally kind of you, Audrey, to say that about us. And I think that's part of what we do here at Auntie Up, is that we do make space for Indigenous voices. The show started with an idea between me, Jolene, and Tanya and Talaga. And then we decided we needed to bring in more voices and not just our own. So I feel like this show is walking the talk.
Yeah, I think that is really the biggest thing. I've been working in this area now, so my role is executive director and governance advisor. So in that governance role, I do a lot of training for chiefs and councils, facilitating different group meetings, doing team building at the First Nation level. And then when we started to talk about health and safety, so we were wanting to bring more health and safety focus to our communities. It immediately went to this lateral violence piece, the violence in community. And we couldn't just deal with it at a workplace level because that's not how our niche worldview works, right? We had to look at our communities, our families, and how this had a bigger impact. So, there's so much to be said about this conversation. But we started to look at really, how do you get communities to own the topic? How do you get communities to own the more positive direction? I think we need to start looking at how do we do it more forward thinking while honoring the past as well, because that past cannot ever be forgotten. But we need to change how do we honor that as we start to move forward too. Because it's so easy. I just know from my own life experience, it's easy to get stuck in a place, right? To get stuck in an experience, a memory. So how can we start to change that as we start to move forward?
And now, we'd like to tell you about a No Indigenous History moment. Every week, the team at No History provides Auntie Up with little-known facts about Indigenous peoples, places, and things. So this moment is on the origins of lateral violence. Do you ever ask yourself where this cancerous behavior comes from? Would you be surprised if I told you it is the Indian Act? Of course you're not surprised if you're a Nietzsche. You know all about the Indian Act, a colonial law that is sexist and discriminates against Indigenous women and their children. Indigenous women have been fighting the government at every turn to try and gain equality. But with every move the government makes to address inequalities, it sneaks a few in. Take Bill C-31, for example. Women lost their Indian status when they married a non-Indigenous man, whereas non-Indigenous women that married status men gained Indian status. Sandra Lovelace married a non-Indigenous man in 1970 and lost her status. She took her case to the United Nations of Human Rights Committee, who ruled that Canada had breached her human rights by revoking her status. She regained her status when she married a status man. The government pats itself on the back and claims it ended sexual discrimination in the Indian Act with Bill C-31. Only the government just passed its discrimination down a generation to the women's children. Sandra Lovelace never saw herself as a warrior, standing up to the government. This experience gave her new insights into the government and our own Indigenous governance. In 1985, in an interview on Our Native Land, when asked how this experience shaped her, Sandra said, "The women have power to get stuff done. When something comes up, we're strong. We're strong fighters. We won't give up." A link to that interview will be shared on our socials, as well as a link to the book, 21 Things You Might Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Joseph, because damn, that act is racist as fuck. No History has brought you this most important factoid and is also a proud sponsor of Auntie Up, the podcast for, by, and about Indigenous women to talk about important shit.
Audrey, how would you suggest, to other community members and those that are experiencing lateral violence or see it, what would be a safe way to respond to that?
One of the things we've done, we've developed a program called the Spirit Builder Program. And this happened very organically. We initially, as in my role of going and doing training for communities, we developed a lateral violence train the trainer program. Which sounded funny, right? Or doing lateral violence awareness training. And then we said, well, there's so much work out there that we need to start training others. And we were very fortunate. I hope that some of you have met, or all of you have had the opportunity to meet Mia Chikabe. And she's an incredible person. And, Creator brought Mia to us. And when we started to develop this Train the Trainer program on lateral violence, Mia just went along with it. But she already knew that something different had to happen. So we developed this 5-day Train the Trainer program. And I can tell you that by day 3, it really changed. And that's where we came up with the Spirit Builder. And it's really what we do now when we come into community. And this takes a lot of courage. And we have to be very prepared as we go into community to do this as well. We have developed a program called The Long Remembering. So we do take people through that experience of what is our true history. And our history with colonization happened long before Columbus hit the shores. And, understanding that political, will to really go and conquer our lands and conquer our people. I mean, that to me was amazingly profound. But understanding also how, once our roles were done in terms of supporting, the Beaver Wars and all of that other stuff, and how being corralled into these, this reserve, even that term reserve made me think like, oh my goodness, like it's a reserve, like where you reserve a spot for animals. And, these imagery started to come to play. And I gained a deeper understanding. And understanding as well, like, I'm my family, myself, I'm a 60 scoop child. And, and I grew up with that whole stigmatism of being Bill C-31 Indian and not having enough blood. So all of these things. So when we take communities through that, it's really quite powerful as a community to go through that, because they start to reflect on their own history as a community, how they became this reserve, for example, why they see some of those challenges with even their elders. I mean, we're going and having difficult conversations about vetting elders right now. Like, that's a really difficult thing to do, to have an elder speak to why are they safe? Because that's part of our history now, right? That's part of our reality. So bringing that to community is really important. And I think the true change will happen when communities embrace the teachings and communities start to adopt and, really almost demand that people start behaving and correction, in a loving way, in a respectful way. Because we do have we talk 7 grandfather teachings, but how do we actually live the teachings, So it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think kindness grows, sweetgrass spreads quickly, and kindness spreads. So if we can start, here we are today, we come back to our communities, we come back to our families, and we start to share. And I often talk to young parents about when we do the sweetgrass teaching, like, what words are your children hearing from you? What words are your children hearing from their teachers? And we really promote, every person needs 10 kind words a day to survive. So how are you spreading that? How are you helping the people around you to survive? And then you need 20 kind words a day to flourish. How are you saying, good job, you look great, nice smile? And even when you meet that young person or that person on the street, like, how are we showing kindness to that person? Humility, humanity. Just sometimes if you meet a niche person, you just have a chat, right? How are you doing today? Where do you come from? Who are your people? Are we related? Chances are we are, especially if you're in Thunder Bay, chances are we're related to people we meet. So I think it really gets down to that basics. There's nothing secret here. It's all really for all of us. And it's just starting.
That impact of colonialism in our communities, we're hearing feedback, from some of our listeners that it's making them really realize how it's affected us and affected who we are as people and how we're interacting and such. And what would you suggest to our listeners on how we can recognize that? And then, do better and, implement those teachings that you're speaking about?
Yeah, you have to govern yourself. Since going down this journey of spirit building, I can tell you I measure my own words on pretty much on a daily basis. Do I make mistakes? Absolutely. But one of my true tests is when I'm driving and someone cuts me off, I no longer use sign language. So... it's because you really don't know what that person's experience is at that moment, right? They might be rushing to the hospital and a loved one, or you just don't know. And that's I think the true point. We really don't know what that other person's experience is. And when we talk about spirit building and kindness, we really focus on my response. So I could have a person standing in front of me. Certainly if someone is threatening physical violence, I'm not going to tolerate that. But if someone is there yelling at me, I will, try to stop them. But I will, my goal is to not participate, is to not elevate and meet that person at that level. Try to do something different. So I take responsibility for my own actions.
Taking responsibility for our own actions might seem clear if you're thinking back to yourself, well, I didn't say anything. You can't tell me what I said that hurt you. And then we get into what we're calling microaggressions. These things happen from, just rolling your, rolling your eyes, a little sigh here and there, or dismissing with a wave of your hand. How do we monitor ourselves when some of these microaggressions that come out of us seem so just intrinsic to the conversation?
I hear it all the time. I'm exposed to it. It's directed at me all the time. And, that passive aggressive type of behavior too, right? And where people say one thing, but their body language and their words are saying something different. It's very challenging. I know for myself, one of the things that I came to realize is that I have a way about me, especially in times of stress, and I always use the year end as a good example. Year end, you've got a lot of time-sensitive stuff. You got a lot of stuff to get caught up on, other stuff to get ready for, the next year. You're dealing with your board of directors. You got people and reports and community are asking you for things. And my way of dealing with that is I just get in the zone and I go forward. But what I learned about myself, though, is my language and my words, although they were not loud and they were not meant to be mean or hurtful, they sounded dismissive. My body language was dismissive, that whoever was talking to me, it wasn't important. So what I started to do was, hey, people, this is what I'm going through right now. It's a very stressful time for me. I apologize if I don't have the time for you. We can make time, but just really acknowledging that person where they were at, because their need was probably just as important as my need at that moment as well. And I'm in a role where I should be supportive, I should be listening, all of those other things. So it's just learning to check yourself, and that's hard. Sometimes that's very hard.
But, there are people, no matter how kind you are, how you speak to them, how you hold your body, how you go back and explain, that's not what I meant, and I'm sorry if you were offended, they will still go on and continue to spread lies about you.
Yeah.
And I know that's happened to me, and I'm trying to let that go, because these people have no bearing on my life whatsoever. So for people who are, who are also dealing with that, what advice can you give us?
All I can do is share with you what I did. I was caught in that place where I was magnifying the problem and focusing on one or two individuals rather than focusing on the bigger picture. And, we talked about crabs in the bucket. Was it caused because of that? I don't know. But I was facing a lot of negativity. People, and the worst part, and that self-reflection part, was I wasn't sure if I was if they weren't correct. And so, I did my job in terms of reflecting, talking to people. But I also learned, and someone gave me this very, very sage advice, and it's something I try to practice every day. I stand on my truth. I walk in love. I really try to walk in love every day. Am I perfect at that? Not at all. But I also magnify the solution and not the problem. I celebrate the people that are positive out there, the people that really help to bring joy, not just to me, but to our community, and pride as well. I think, again, we spend far too much time on the negative, and we don't spend near enough time celebrating the small things even, So I don't know if that can help you, but I can tell you, for me, magnifying the solution is far more powerful than magnifying the problem. Focus on what is positive. Focus on those that support and love you, and that will carry you far.
Sometimes when I feel like I'm experiencing lateral violence or aggression, my immediate response is to respond aggressively, and it feels so righteous. They started it. So how do we call this out? How do we call out lateral violence without being laterally violent?
Well, like I said, those simple things of just put your hand up. Hey, something's going on here, right? This is not good. One of the other things I've learned through our Spirit Builder program is that the first time when you feel that aggression and that physical response you have, for me, it's very physical. I feel it in my body. I can feel it right in the belly. I notice the the distance between my shoulders and my ears lessens because, you're holding your body tight. So I reckon what I learned is that is not the first time you have ever felt that way. So reflecting on when was the first time I experienced that trauma in my life and starting to build a new relational home. And one of the things we talk about, and there's a workshop we do as well, it's called the trauma dogs. And we relate to them like the res dogs. They're kind of just running around out there. Sometimes they're quite beautiful, but you just don't know when they're going to attack, right? You don't know when they're going to show up. And they're unruly. And our trauma is exactly like that. So a really simple thing, and it takes great reflection. And it's something you have to do on a regular basis. Stop. Hey, something's happening here. I'm feeling this way, and I'm feeling afraid, and I'm feeling fearful, or I'm feeling anxious. Like those are not, for me, those are really, I don't really like that kind of feeling. I don't like feeling that way. So I stop, I recognize that, I drop. So sometimes that could be aggression or fight, flight, or freeze, right? That's how we respond to trauma or those feelings. So if you're going to fight, that's probably not going to end well. And you're probably going to end up leave and feel worse than you did before. Flight, that's usually my go-to, take off and not deal with it. Or just freeze and stand there and just take it. So when you start to create recognize that relationship, then start role modeling. Stop, drop the behavior and role model the behavior that you'd like to see. So that may say, I don't appreciate you're yelling at me right now, so I think we need to take a break and I'm going to step back. And when you want to talk, we'll come back. So there's all different ways you can talk, but oftentimes that surprises the person that's being aggressive towards you as well.
I feel like you may have just created a new marketing campaign, stop, drop, and roll model.
It's all part of our Spirit Builder program. And again, I have to give credit to Maya. Maya has helped us to develop some really great understandings. Using our elders as well and our knowledge keepers has been very important to this.
Are we conflating, as we have this conversation, we're having to do this in a new way as we move through an Anglo-settler world with our cultural values? How much of this, too, is conflating kindness with weakness and aggression with strength?
That's a good one. That's a really good one. For me, this conversation, being a part of this type of circle is such an honor for me. And I don't really get caught up in how do I say that? Sometimes there's things that happen that become flavor of the day. And when we talk lateral violence and when we talk about some of the workshops we do, for some groups, it is a flavor of the day. It's a tick the box, right? Let's do this long remembering with Makwa and Audrey, and then we can tick the box that we have understanding about Indigenous people. So I really don't get caught up in that because every person has their own set of, hey, this is interesting to me. Hey, I think I could adopt this, or hey, I can just tick the box and walk away, right? So I think the more conversations we have about this, we will start to change people's thoughts. They say 33% of the people are already, ready to go. 33% of the people will be like, this will be a mind shift, and 33% of the people will be the status quo. But they'll watch and they'll see the change and they'll see the positive things that are happening. And think of that blade of sweetgrass, right? It spreads. Kindness spreads one person at a time, one kind deed at a time.
Audrey, I'm glancing through social media posts, and I seen a post the other day of a young woman celebrating her accomplishments and her achievements. And she felt incredibly upset, and it affected her when she was told that she was just bragging and standing on her own, horse of celebration. And what would we say to someone like that?
I would tell her, that young person, to, again, you cannot stop what people are going to say. And I'm sorry, social media is one of those outlets that I think has done more harm to our people and to all people, because people can say anything they want without any consequence of having to talk to me and say it to my face. So I have been a person in the last 5 years, I go on and off Facebook very regularly because I don't want to contribute and participate in that negative space. And more so now than ever. COVID, you think of all of the COVID stuff. You think of Donald Trump and all of the Donald Trump stuff. I mean, these are just not one-offs. These are just ways in which people seem so at ease to be hurtful. And I just don't want to participate in that any longer. I wish we could have a Facebook page or something like that, or a newspaper that's just all about happiness and kindness and all those wonderful good things to celebrate. So that, for me, that message to that young person, Stephanie, would be, be shiny. Don't be rough. Don't go down that road. Let them be. They're going to be that way anyway, right?
That's right. Yes. Mm-hmm. Keep shining, keep blazing. Keep shining. Exactly. Great words.
Yeah, because we do need to celebrate our successes, and we do need to, we talk about there's not enough positive stories out there. And then when there are really positive stories, the people who are sharing their accomplishments, who we need as role models, then get shit on, and then they shut down. And we need to keep raising them up.
Yeah. And, I think in a kind way, we need to start calling people out too. We need to start calling out bad behavior. And not, because there's far too much of it, in my opinion. I wanted to share with you one of the things that we've developed through our Spirit Builder program. So sweetgrass is really integral to a lot of the work we do. So that's shiny in the rough side. So I don't know if you can see this, but we have a deck, it's called a sweetgrass deck. So on one side, it has negative words. And I'll share with you one of my favorite words I use. It's, oh my goodness, gullible. Gullible is the word. So my name is Gilbeau. So for a long time, in my younger years especially, I was known as Gullible Gilbeau. And, I didn't really see any harm in it. And my son says to me one day, he was about 13 years old at the time, a real smart ass at that age, right? And he says, Mom, did you know that gullible was not in the dictionary? And I said to him, you're kidding. Anyway, so gullible can be seen as a negative word, right? But when you turn it over to the shiny side, it's trusting. And I have no problem with being called trusting. So just another one, for example, demanding. And if you turn it over, it's persistent. So I keep the deck of sweetgrass cards on my desk as a reminder, along with a blade of sweetgrass.
Do you have one that says challenging?
I do. I'd have to find it. But yeah, I do.
I've been called challenging lots. Yeah. And I even have a t-shirt. My best friend gave me a t-shirt that says challenging. Her matching one is difficult. And we wear those titles with pride.
May I offer strong, Kim? Mm-hmm. When I see you, when I see the women I'm joined with here, and your friend who you're talking about, what lands on me is strong. Yes.
Yeah. So starting to use those more shiny words, I think it's something that we can all do as well, right?
Where can we find those shiny words that you speak about in your deck there, Audrey? I am intrigued on how to get myself a set.
Well, I just come and visit us at NoQ, and then I'll give you one, Stephanie.
I will sure be by.
That's in Thunder Bay.
Yes.
So we're going to have to rely on our Thunder Bay aunties to send us out some.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay,
They're really
we'll be
great.
letting them know.
Yeah. When we do the sweetgrass teaching and use the cards, I've had, like in one session, we had one of the moms took her deck of cards home, did it with her family. Her young child took it to school the next day, and turned out to be some minister was visiting the school that very same day. And they did the sweetgrass teaching with the sweetgrass cards with that person. And then that person took them off with him. So it's just an example of how kindness can grow.
I'd like to go back to talking about the young people for a moment, because one of the things that occurred to me is that they seem to not have the patience for lateral violence that I feel like that we had. And maybe because we had to. We've been breaking into spaces and conversations that haven't really been open to us. And one of the things that I noticed was they lift each other up unapologetically. They say, I love you more freely. They talk about how beautiful their friends are, how strong they are, how intelligent they are. And I was having a conversation a short time ago with a young woman who I'm close with. And I said, oh, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. And she said, why not? Why? Brag. And it was so, I felt really shy all of a sudden, but she wasn't having any of it. She said, brag. So I want to acknowledge that the young people are changing the conversation for us just by being.
Yeah, that's true. I'll do some really simple sessions like the sweetgrass teaching or the medicine wheel teachings, or, we have some young people that come through an education program. And I can tell you with this group of young people, these are very marginalized young people, really having life struggles and very difficult times in their life. But when you create that space, they gain connection. But the one thing I do notice about our young people, they're all hungry for identity. And maybe that's it. Maybe those strong young people have that identity. They know who they are, and they're not ashamed of it. I mean, I can tell you for myself, I was a proud Anishinaabe, not at all. There was a time when I was quite embarrassed and shamed by, where I came from and some of what had happened to us. So I think that's a big part of it too. And we talk about, with our Spirit Builder program, we talk about that importance of identity. And Ron Kanutsky, for those of you that know Ron, one thing he's given me is a teaching that he said that all people need 4 things. They need identity, belonging, self-esteem, and purpose. And when we're missing one of those 4 things, then we're missing something really important. Or we go finding it in places that may not be the best for us. So I think that identity, those teachings, and our young people listen to the teachings, and it means something to them because they're hungry for that connection too.
Wow, Audrey, those are some incredible words to share with us. And thank you so much for being here and sharing the Spirit Builder program and all the good things that are involved in. And any final words for our listeners?
You can choose to be rough or you can choose to be shiny. So, show your shiny side, really simply.
I'm going to show my shiny side because after we started, I realized that my camera wasn't set. So if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm going to just pull my camera down so you can see my shiny. See, it says Ojibwe for all those listening.
So one thing too, Ron Kanutsky has a T-shirt. It says less bitching and more miigwetching. So I think that's a good one.
I like it. I love it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Shoni Sun, Audrey, for your words and taking the time today, and in such a kind way as well. And for me, as much as I would like to change the world around me, I always am more mindful as I get older that I have one person I'm able to change, and that's myself, and I choose to be shiny.
Awesome. If I can just say one quick thing, I just want to acknowledge, Nokiwan Tribal Council and all of the work of our Gimina-Madozaman Steering Committee and the Gimina-Madozaman team for all of the work, because this is a difficult conversation, and to have the courage to bring this to community, I think is, that's how we're going to make changes, by being the role models of change and of kindness. So miigwech to all of you as well.
Nanaskamoin, miigwech. Thank you, Audrey, for all that. And I will say thank you to everyone here for listening to us today. Miigwech for all those thoughts and good feelings that this will bring.
Shroni Thun. In an upcoming episode, we're going to discuss the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It has been 2.5 years since the final report was released. We will be talking with a family member and an expert to see if this report has made a difference in their lives and in the lives of Indigenous women in this country.
And remember to follow us and like us on our social medias and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We drop a new episode every Monday. Wajayak, Misawe, Miigwech, Nanaskamun for listening.
Sokosani, Denat A. Take good care of yourselves.
Chimigwech. Auntie Up is produced by Jolene Banning, Kim Wheeler, and Sam Makwa for Makwa Creative. Our executive producer is Tanya Talaga. Our partner is Antica Productions. Auntie Up is sponsored by Know History and Anna Mickey, Indigenous Innovation since 2003. Follow and like us on socials at Auntie Up Podcast on Facebook, Auntie.up on Instagram, and Auntie Up 1 on Twitter.